Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. Tim Hebert talked to me a while back about coming here today, and he said that this year's theme was going to be about resiliency. And he said, Trent, you have a resilient story, you should come and talk. And I never really thought of myself as resilient. I never thought of myself as a resilient person until the moment I had to become one. A minute about myself, as Chris has said, I'm a vice president of finance at Tilsch Engineering. Most importantly, I'm a carousel customer. I'm a graduate school professor here at Johnson Wales University. I'm an endurance athlete. According to well-placed sources, I'm a passionate lover. Well-paid source. Oh, I'm not sure that's a whole lot better. I've become a writer. I'm the father of 2 children, and after an accident which paralyzed me, I created a foundation to help people with spinal cord injuries receive durable medical goods. More than education, more than experience, more than training, the level of resiliency in a person will determine how much they succeed or if they fail. 15 years ago, I was in an accident, which left me paralyzed. It changed my life instantly. Spinal cord injuries are a little different than other illnesses or injuries, and that's not to make light of them. But with a spinal cord injury, your life changes in a second, and everything you knew is gone, and it takes so much more to start again, more than you would know. I was in the hospital, and I'm feeling this self-loathing about what happened to me. I was struck down. I was in the prime of my life, and how can this happen? And when adversity hits many of us, we think those, how can this be me? Couldn't have happened to me. And I was feeling anxious. And what you may not know is that when you have a traumatic injury, the hospital gives you a plunger that's attached to a morphine drip, so you can self-medicate as needed for anxiety. And it's not really for the pain, it's for anxiety. Like when the doctor comes in and he squeezes your toe and you can't feel it. Or when your mother-in-law comes in and she wants to know how you're going to support her daughter. It was while I was there in the hospital, I started to try to figure out what did I want to do with the rest of my life. And I created a list. I created a list of things I wanted to do, and many of you folks might know these type of lists. They call them bucket lists. And I think bucket lists are a bad name because it implies that you're going to die. So I was making this list because there were things that I wanted to do because I was going to live. So instead of calling a bucket list, I called them coming attractions. My coming attractions. And so I'm going to show you my coming attractions that I wrote on the back of an envelope somebody had sent me. So here are my coming attractions. Now, the first thing I want you to know is that morphine does not go well with penmanship. So I'm going to have to read these because you may not be able to get to them. So I wanted to walk. I wanted to climb a flight of stairs. I wanted to lift Haley and Max, my 2 children. I wanted to drive to work and go to work. I wanted to have sex with my wife. I wanted to go to the Red Sox. And then I put the pen down for a little bit because I go, we need to get a little more exciting here. I wanted to run a marathon. I wanted to climb a skyscraper. I wanted to do the Ironman. And I wanted to do some type of unprecedented swim. And I really didn't know what at the time. So as I look out at this lovely capacity-filled audience here, I can appreciate the lascivious nature of you and that your eyes are moving directly to number 5. So This was important to me. If you put the circumstances, I'm in the middle of my prime years, and I can't feel from the waist down. So number 5 was quite important to me. So I will leave it at this. According to well-placed sources, I was able to cross that off the list. I'm sure she thanks you too. Tim Hebert came up and he talked about people that are resilient have 3 primary qualities. They accept their reality. They have a purpose. And they have an uncanny ability to improvise. And I thought hard about those 3 items that Tim said, and I said, I know that person. It's MacGyver. But he was right. Those 3 qualities are in resilient people. And I believe that they're in all of us when the circumstances are right. I also believe that they exist in companies. The community of you working in your company can be highly resilient. The culture of a company can be very resilient. The sum of its parts are very resilient. I want to tell you a story about a company that I thought was very resilient. Now, this story goes back to 75. And as I look out at this audience, there weren't so many of you that were around back then. So it's a small company, startup, and it's trying to enter a market that is dominated by a near monopoly. And they have a novel product that is on the precipice of crossing that chasm into the mainstream. Do you know this company yet? Okay, I'll give you a couple more clues here. So this company, this is taking place in Boston, and the near monopoly is applying all of its capital, or most of its capital resources to try to bankrupt the startup. A lot of people from Boston here, no guesses yet. Okay, so I should have been a little more fair. I told you it took place in 75. I should have been a little more clear. It took place in 1775, and the monopoly at the time was the British Empire. And this story of resilience is about a young 25-year-old bookseller. The situation as we know it, the British occupy the Boston Harbor, and Washington and the Continental Army are looking to move them, but they only have small arms. They need some heavy artillery to move the British out. And they come up with a plan to go to Fort Ticonderoga, which is the southern tip of Lake Champlain, where they know to be upwards of 60 working cannons. And they want to bring them from Vermont back to Boston. And Henry Knox signs up for the duty. Our man Henry Knox here. Now, these old pictures, they never look young, do they? Washington gives him a budget, gives him 1,000 pounds, and says, come back 30 days. So Knox leaves on November 17th, 1775, and the first thing he needs to do is travel to New York City to get supplies. Now, this is before the Acela. So they're on horseback going from Boston to New York City to get supplies and then back up the Hudson River to Fort Ticonderoga. When they get there to Fort Ticonderoga, they find that there are 59 working cannons, including 2 big Berthas. Now, these are 11 feet long cannons that weigh 5,000 pounds, 2 big bad girls. The cannons in total weigh 119,000 pounds. And so they take them out of the fort, move them to the northern point of Lake George, and they put them on floats. and float them down Lake George. Knox goes ahead of the team to Albany so he can make preparations to change out supplies to make the trip east to Boston. He comes back to the southern point of Lake George and gets a report. Colonel, one of the floats sank, ran aground. We lost 2 of the cannons. Now, we would consider that to be an acceptable loss. We still got 57 pretty good cannons, and including 2 Big Berthas. But not to Knox. Knox takes the team, and they go back up Lake George. And this is where I start to think of Knox as being resilient. As Tim said, he understood the situation they were in. He had a purpose. They wanted to get the British out. And an uncanny ability to improvise. They had the teams go into the water. Now, I told you that this is now December in upstate New York. That water is cold. They raise the floats, bring them down to the end of the lake, and they make their way to Albany, get their supplies, and they start to make their way east. And within a day's journey, they are hit by a snowstorm that drops 2 feet of snow. And this is before Mark Searles gets on the news and tells us to go buy bread and milk. They make their way back. Wait a week. Then they go out, cross the Hudson River, which at this point is now frozen over. But the weight of these have started to break some of the ice. But in each circumstance, they're able to pull the sled out. They cross the river, and they make their way through the Berkshire Mountains, down what's called now the Knox Trail. Many of you drive right next to it on the Mass Pike. That's the Mass Pike. As he comes up and out of the mountains, and this is a depiction of the trail, he gets into Springfield, and he notices something happening. People have heard about this trek, this hard, arduous trek, and they've come out to cheer. People have come out to offer food to them, fresh horses, their houses. He gets through Springfield, into Worcester, to Framingham. The crowds are getting bigger. The last 20 miles, John Adams rides with them. He gets into Boston on December 25th. 38 days after he left. So he was a few days off. Washington knew just what to do with those cannons, put them on the high ground, and bomb the British back to Nova Scotia. And just like every good government project with its budget, he only spent 571 pounds. Knox is resilient. His team is resilient. But there's a difference. They knew they were in for some hard work. I mean, they knew traveling there in winter, but there's a difference between something that's hard and something that's resilient. Because hard work is hard, resilient you do for other purposes. How do we know if we're resilient? How do we, sitting here, standing here, know if we're resilient? And I would say, you probably don't. I didn't. I didn't know that I was resilient until I had to be. I want to tell you about the 10th item on my list, but I need to give you a little bit of a backdrop. I went kayaking one night after work, and it was a night just like this. Full moon was out. And while I was kayaking, I heard a boat behind me. And it was coming right towards me, and I tried to steer away, but for some reason the boat was still there. And as it was only a couple hundred yards away from me, I took my paddle above me, and I start waving it behind me. Hey, hey! And the boat doesn't veer off its course. And I realized that there are seconds in my life left, because if the boat hits me, I'm afraid that it's going to just cut my head, throat. And so I think the best way to survive is to go under the water. And so I roll over and I go under the water, and I make one large breaststroke pull. And that's when I got hit by the boat. And it felt like getting tackled in football. You lose your wind. And then an instant later, the propellers hit me 4 times from my butt to the middle part of my back. And that felt like being hit by a 2x4, where somebody is swinging it behind you. I'm under the water, it's dark, and I've lost sense of direction. And I'm trying to assess where I am, and I can't move my left arm, and I can't move my legs. And I make my way to the surface, and I see the boat is still going away. And I'm scared about what I have to do. How am I going to get out of this water? I reach around to what I think is an exposed rib. And I go under the water because I have nothing to hold myself up. And I pull myself back up. And they keep motoring away. And so I have a decision to make. Do I swim for the shore where hopefully somebody can see me? It's only a couple hundred yards away. And I was a swimmer in college, so a couple hundred yards back then was nothing. But now, I'm sure I can make it. But what if nobody's home? The boat stops, parks, and now I have a decision to make. What do I do? It comes back, but not towards me. It goes the other way. Swim to the shore, swim to the boat. I make the choice to swim to the boat. And I get closer and closer to them. They're trolling at this point. They're looking for something. And they go by me. And that's when I really thought I'm losing hope, because the one thing I don't know about my injuries is I don't know how much I'm bleeding. I don't know if I'm going to bleed out here. The boat turns around, comes towards me, and they find me, and they take me in. And that starts this journey that I've been on. And I'll tell you that resilience is a reflex. It isn't planned. We don't go to work every day saying, I'm going to answer my 30 emails, I'm going to work on the budget, and today I will be resilient. That doesn't happen that way. You become resilient when the conditions are thrust upon you. Like Daniel. Daniel became resilient when the conditions were thrust upon him. But I'll say that there's one more thing about resiliency. As I'm sitting in the hospital bed and I'm making the list, and the one thing I'm thinking about is my 2 young children. Haley was 8, Max was 3, and I wanted to get up and I wanted to walk. I wanted to be a normal father again. At that point, every night I would go to put Max to bed, and he loved to have a horsey ride before every night in bed. So I'd get on all fours and I would go up to wherever he was reading or watching TV or something, and he'd get on the horse. And he had his choice of horses. We had the bucking bronco. We had the slow and stupid horse. That one would get lost in different rooms. And then his favorite was the fast, sleepy one. So, that would just tear off and then just collapse with a sudden bout of narcolepsy or something. And to start every ride, he'd grab it, and he'd lean into my ears and yell in this southern drawl, "Go." And that's who I wanted to be resilient for. That's who I wanted to be. We listened last year, those of you that were here, Steve McClatchy, he had said, there are things we have to do in life. There are things we want to do in life. Resiliency is wanting to do things in life for other people. So I decided those first 9 items on my list, I did for myself. But the 10th item on the list, I wanted to do for other people. And I decided the swim I was going to do was to Block Island from Point Judith and I was going to swim it entirely backstroke as a show of solidarity for people with spinal cord injuries. This is Point Judith. This is where I was leaving from. I contacted the University of Rhode Island. I asked an oceanographer for help with the tides because I had heard they were quite tricky. So he gave me some map. I met David Estrada from Rise Above Paralysis. They're a peer mentoring group out of the Spaulding Hospital in Boston. When you have a spinal cord injury in this part of New England, you go there and you get help by people that have the same injury as you. Whichever L4, L6, that you were injured, they will pair you with somebody so that person can talk to you, explain to you what life's going to be like, with the expectation that in 2 years, you'll come back and pay it forward. And I told him I wanted to create a foundation with this swim to provide durable medical goods for those people that are newly injured because they're not covered by insurance. So we're ready to go. The Saturday after, 2 Saturdays after Labor Day, and I notice that there is a hurricane forming in Southern Atlantic, Hurricane Leslie, which is starting to make me nervous because you can see online what the wave markers are. And the wave markers are normally at Block Island about 3 feet. And each progressive day, it went to 4, then to 7, then to 9, and 3 days before the swim, on the Wednesday before, it got to 12 feet. And I'm pretty nervous about this. So I call my coach. His name is Mike Sever. And Sever has a little bit of surfer dude in him, so I call him up, I say, Mike. Yeah. I said, Mike, I'm a little nervous about these waves. Maybe, we should think a little something else. Maybe I should wear a wetsuit. Maybe I should swim freestyle. Maybe we should move the date. Nah. Mike, the waves are 12 feet high. He goes, what's the worst that's going to happen? You drown? Yeah. He said, so you drown. We'll serve good scotch at the memorial service. He said, you made a commitment to the people of the spinal cord community. You made a commitment to the hundreds of people that are going to show up at Block Island. You have people online watching it. You made a commitment to your crew, and you made a commitment to me. And he was right. I made a commitment. And I realized, again, I needed to be resilient for somebody. I should inform you that this is the waves of Point Judith on a calm day. So it's now Thursday, 2 days before, and I received an email from the oceanographer at URI with the subject line, I effed up. And I'm thinking, this can't be good. What else? I read it. He says, Trent, I made a mistake. I mistimed the currents. You won't be able to make it. The currents that you're going to swim in are not going to get you to Block Island. They're going to send you to Long Island. And I said, I got 2 days. I can't change what's happening. I've made a commitment. This is the map of the currents that we expected. So in the top left here is Point Judith, and the center here is obviously Block Island, and you can see a tiny, tiny point that is the North Lighthouse there. The size of the yellow arrows represent the strength of the current. This is what we planned for. I said, sign me up, I can manage this. This is the current I got. The water moved faster than I could swim. We had to find a different way to get to the island. I thought it was polite of him not to mention the 12-foot waves in his email. I'm riding actually, to the to the starting point at Point Judith, and I'm really wondering what type of scotch they're going to serve at the memorial service. And I'm nervous, and I am scared, but I'm determined to face this. And I get there, and I notice that there are already almost 100 people at 6 in the morning that have come to watch this start, or watch my death. So one or the other. And it filled me a little bit. And then I saw my friend David. And it filled me with courage. Because, again, I realized who I was being resilient for. I was there because I got out of the wheelchair. I was there to help those people that didn't. And it gave me what I needed inside to be resilient, to take on the waves, to take on the currents that day. My favorite picture from this event is right here. And this is Sever at the swimming the last part with me. And what you can't see is me holding on to the rocks because the tide is pulling me away. We made the block island with 150 yards to spare. Resiliency is about facing your adversity, understanding where you are, having a purpose, having an ability to improvise. And I think that exists in all of us. When the circumstances are right, is this in you? It exists in your coworkers. Resiliency is a reflex. But most importantly, when you're faced with that adversity, you have to act. You have to act then. You have to act now. You cannot wait. There is no day but today to take the actions you need to. Don't put off for tomorrow what can be done today. Carpe diem. Seize the fish. If you wait, you miss the moment. And the moment to show resiliency for someone else goes. And so take the opportunity. Take the chance. Be brave. Be bold. Go ahead. Kiss the girl. Who knows? It might be what she's been waiting for. Folks, thank you very much for letting me share my story with you. I hope that you enjoy the rest of this conference. Thank you so much. Thank you.